Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Welcome to this upload. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter, and they are appreciated. And with that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's upload, shall we? Alright, so today I got two things. Subscriber submitted experience, a wild one at that. And I'm going to go into some information on that flash drive. To be honest with you, I was reading some of this information I'm going to share with you guys from that flash drive. I started scrolling through and I realized that I had spent almost 2 hours reading one tiny fraction of storage on this flash drive, and like really looked at how in-depth everything is on there. I could probably make 3 videos a day, an hour and a half each from that flash drive, and not have it done in 5 years, to be honest with you. It is just a wealth of information. Some of it I don't know how to go about sharing. Just like yesterday's upload, with the Sumerian text and stuff like that. I felt it necessary to constantly say, Jesus is king, because I don't want people to interpret what I'm saying wrong. Like that's my beliefs, which it's not. It's just beliefs from an ancient civilization, ancient men, so I've got to really sit down and figure it all out and how to go about going deep diving with you guys on it, because it's a lot of stuff and I think you guys will like it quite a bit. So experience. I've had an opportunity. I had a doctor's appointment. I had to drive about an hour and a half south today. And it was, okay, I can listen to music, listen to a podcast, or I can try to get in touch with this gentleman that I've been trying to get in touch with for 6 or 7 months now. And I figured, let's try it. So I did. I texted him and I said, hey, I have about an hour and a half free today. I'm going to be driving. If you're free, let me know. Then we can, connect and you can share your experience with me. 5 minutes before I'm leaving, I get the text. I'm like, sweet. Immediately, right when I got onto the road, got onto the Northway in the southbound direction, and I give him a call. Now, he is from the Kentucky-Virginia region, right there in the border. He is born and raised in Virginia. He lives in Kentucky now. He's about an hour from where he grew up in Virginia. He grew up in an area, in a region notorious for the strangeness, this high strangeness, this Appalachian I can't even come up with a word for it besides high strangeness. There's just so much that goes on. You have people talking about Dogman, Bigfoot, portals, crawlers, witches, haints, and other things. Like, I've heard of almost a cryptid-like creature that was a cross between a xenomorph and some sort of mammalian, an insect-like creature. So like the Appalachians are just absolutely terrifying. And he grew up there. And his experience, he had his experience in a region known as the Cumberland Gap, which, if you're familiar with the Appalachia at all, that region, you know that it is very rich in high strangeness history. So, Rory, this is Rorys Experience, and I'm going to share it with you right now. All right, so 1998, Rory was 19 years old. And that was a time, 98 was, pre-internet. The internet was there, but it was still a very interesting time to be alive. You know what I mean? It was still fun, and everything wasn't at the click of your fingers. You actually had to go and do things and experience them to live. It was just, it's totally different. And you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, being that he grew up in this area, him and his buddy, he is going to remain anonymous. He's passed. He had died in a really bad car accident, like actually a year after this experience. So growing up in this region, he was living in Virginia at the time, and they had heard about this supposed settlement that was in the Shiloh Creek region, called the Hensley Settlement. And supposedly it was supposed to be haunted. People had seen strange figures like ghosts, nothing cryptid from the information he had gotten. Like his family members, his grandmother would say, like, the haints are out there. You ought not to go out there, especially don't go out at night. Don't cross the creek. Just old kind of folklore, wives' tales. And, when you're that age, you got to go explore it, especially back then. And I know that my age group of this channel is just a little younger than I am, maybe 10 years younger to 65, 70. So 35 to 70. So the majority of you all know what it's like to have lived back then. And later. So they had come up with the idea to, let's go check this out. We have nothing else to do. They had been talking about it for a couple weeks and planning it. They were trying to figure out the best way of getting there, because the Virginia-Kentucky border, where the region is in that Cumberland Gap, is just thick woods. It's not, there's not many trails there. Even back then, there was hardly any kind of trail systems. So what they decided to do was go to the Kentucky side and kind of find an area to park and take the Shiloh Creek trail system. take it out into the woods, wait until after dark just in case any kind of staff or personnel were there, and go in with your crappy 1990s flashlights, and see just how haunted this place is. So they set off, and they left his house roughly around 5 p.m., maybe a little later. He remembers it kind of being almost dusk. And we're talking September time. He believes it was the end of September, his exact date. But it was getting chilly at night. You know, you'd have to wear a sweatshirt or a flannel, maybe a vest. So they waited till about 5 and left. And they got to a parking area about an hour and a half later. They had taken a couple wrong turns and kind of gotten mixed up. And that's one of the bigger kind of things, is he thinks that if they didn't get mixed up, they could have had an easier time, because it would have been a little more brighter out, a little more light left, because they didn't get there until almost 6:30, 7 o'clock. And at that point, it was near dark. There was just a faint bit of light in the sky. So they get to this parking area. They're talking amongst themselves, like both excited, both kind of rearing to go, like, let's check this out. I can't wait. And they proceed to hike in. Now, it's about where they parked. He said it's about maybe a mile to a mile and a half in. No more than 2 miles max. So they're talking amongst themselves, walking in. And like I said, if they hadn't gotten turned around and mixed up in the drive, they probably would have had a half an hour to 45 minutes more time of light, because that 1.5 to 2 miles stretch of trails is another 20-30 minutes just walking at a steady pace, bullshitting. So now it's dark, and they end up, as they're coming up to the area, because they had kind of marked out a small, like a tourist kind of map, that was, because this area is kind of like a historical touristy area, this Hensley settlement. I've never heard of it, but there's all sorts of these little settlements all throughout the Appalachia, I guess. And they're walking up into it. They're not even quite to it yet. And they start to see kind of these lights off in the distance. Almost like a set of flashlights. And they had noticed 1 or 2 at first, and then they'd noticed like maybe 3, 4 coming up on 5. And they're kind of like talking about it. They kind of slow right down. Like, hey, what the hell? Like, do you think there's people out here still? Do you think it's, someone from the Kentucky Park Rangers? What do you think? Should we go? Yeah, we should go. Let's go. And they proceed to watch the lights. And these lights are moving, but not really coming towards them. They're just like moving throughout the woods. And they know where this settlement is. So they're like, we've got to kind of walk almost by where these lights are. So what are we going to do? When we get to And they're walking, but it seems like they are never making it to the lights. Now, they get to where the settlement is. They got to turn into this kind of walkway and get into it. And they're still seeing the lights in the distance. But imagine you see a set of lights or some sort of whatnot 200-300 feet away, or maybe a football field away, and it stays that distance the whole time as you are walking into this area. So now they're like, what the hell? And something that his grandmother had said, he's like, you don't think that's the Haints, do you? And they laugh. They kind of laugh it off, like, ha ha ha, like what normal late teens are going to do. Late teen, early 20s. Just bullshit, And so they kind of walk in and they're looking, and there's a couple little structures. Nothing huge, nothing major. It's a very interesting little intricate kind of settlement. And they walk in and they're starting to look around. But they keep an eye on those lights. They walk to the end of the settlement and they sit down and they're like, what should we do? Should we have like some sort of, try to have like a seance, try to summon something? Just like when I was younger with my cousins playing with the Ouija board. It's just like little asshole things that teenagers do. Because we're unaware of exactly what we're messing with, So that's exactly what they do. They start to pretend to have or not pretend, but they start to kind of like, they sit between each other, or in front of each other, and they're like kind of talking amongst themselves, if there's any spirits here, make yourself known. We are here to help you. We're here to serve you, whatnot. Just dumb stuff to say. And as they're sitting there, they hear this scream. And it is the cliche, typical, it sounded like a woman being murdered scream in the middle of the woods. They both stop and they realize that it's behind them. So not back into the settlement or back the way they came, but where those lights would have been. They immediately, Rory kind of turns because his buddy's facing Rory, so his buddy can see. Rory turns and they're looking, and the lights are like spread out now. And then all of a sudden they go just boom, gone. So you've had these lights that are no more than 10, 15 feet apart at one point, 4 or 5 of them. And then they spread out into like almost like this line. And then click, it was almost like someone clicked a switch. And Rory turns his flashlight on and he's like, what the hell was that? What the hell? They're both terrified. That scream was, something that they were definitely not expecting and not ready for. And so they both stand up and they start to kind of backtrack towards these couple structures that are there. There's some old dilapidated fencing and stuff, I guess. And they're trying to keep an eye on the area of where the lights or whatever they were at, because their fear is super high right now. That scream, and it was one scream. Now they're 10 minutes into having an absolutely panic attack. Both of them are just, debating on leaving, but almost still too afraid to leave. Like they'd actually contemplated on staying right where they were until daytime, until, dawn hits, and then booking it the hell out of there. They had, backpack, they had like knife with them, they had water, nothing, no firearms, but they did have a few pocket knives and whatnot with them. So immediately they pull out their knives, and we're not even talking like a fixed blade. We're talking just like a buck knife. So they've got them out, and they're like, what should we do? Should we leave? And it's dead silent for 20 minutes. Rory looks at his friend and says, well, maybe it was our imagination. Maybe our imagination got the better of us. Maybe it is the Haints. Maybe it's the spirits of the Appalachia, and they're messing with us. Maybe they scared us enough to where they don't want to mess with us anymore. Let's move over to kind of the middle of this settlement area, and we'll figure out what we're going to do from there. If we don't see any more lights, we'll still try to do our seance thing. And then if the lights do come back before we start our little seance, we'll book it the hell out of here. So nothing happens. Nothing. And they're comfortable. And they're laughing at it. They're like, haha, maybe it was some kids like us. At this point, they are convinced that it was someone their age, not even aware that they were out there, but just fucking off themselves, And they sit by this kind of dilapidated fence structure, and they start to do their little seance thing again. And they, if you're here, give us a sign. Knock on a piece of the wood over here where we're sitting. Make yourself known. And they're sitting quietly, and they ask a few more times. We know that there is spirits here. Please make yourself known. We just want to try and communicate with you. And then, like, 15 minutes goes by, and they're just sitting there, and they stop doing their seance thing. Now they're just kind of talking amongst themselves, just random nothing. And the woods from the side of them where they were sitting, so the woods to their right, and if you're picturing how they came in, the trail system would be behind them or behind one of them. The lights where they had seen it are in front of them. So they would hit the trail system and then go right, and then walk through the trails and get out that way. The woods that this noise came from was to the right. So no matter what, even if they stood up and started running, they may have an opportunity, or a really bad opportunity, of running into whatever made that noise, because it was almost like, he said he's watched the video where I was sitting, where Tom Mesick disappeared, and I'm sitting on those two boulders, and I've got my camera in front of me. I'm narrating the Yakima marine story. And all of a sudden, the woods behind me it sounded like not a bulldozer, but a bobcat. Like it was, the woods just erupted behind me. I gotta let the cat in. Come on, bud. Come on. And so when that happened, it was loud. He said it was almost louder than what you heard and what you caught on video that day. It was like the whole woods for about 30-40 feet just was, something was there, and something very big was there. We didn't see anything. We couldn't see any kind of eye shine. There was no growling. There was no snarling. There was no any kind of screeching. Just almost like there was a mass amount of damage going on to these trees and brush and whatnot. They stand up and they put their packs back on. By now, their pocket knives are back in their pockets because they had no, And his buddy, he remembers his buddy turning the flashlight on. And Rory said, don't turn it on. It'll know where we are. And as he's in the middle of saying, his buddy turns the flashlight. I got cold chills sharing that. As he turns the flashlight on, there is literally this immense light, probably 200 to 300 feet, literally just on the opposite side of the settlement, almost right at the beginning of the wood line. This just bright light. And it's not high up in the air. It's maybe 2 to 3 feet off the ground. And it's wide. It's wide. He'd say if he had to guess, the light source would have been maybe 20 feet and 2 to 3 feet off the ground. It was almost like you could see darkness, light, darkness. And then you saw this just light in the middle of it. And then his buddy turns the flashlight off. And they're both kind of standing still. And Rory grabs his friend's arm and goes this way. And they walk very quietly and very slowly because they did not want to make any kind of noise. They have no idea what is going on. Now, mind you, they've walked in, they've seen lights. They heard this screech or scream, that very cliche woman being killed. And now you hear these just loud, what sounded like the woods being destroyed. And now you have this weird light source. And so they are just at their wits' end. His buddy, as Rory grabs his arm, his buddy turns the flashlight off. And they walk around this kind of structure. He thinks it could have been like an outhouse or something at one point. They did not go into any of these little kind of structures that are there. There's not many, but there's a few. They go around that to look. So almost to give them kind of like a shield. In case anything came out of the woods, it wouldn't be able to see them immediately. So they're trying to look that way at it. Damn, I'm getting cold chills just from sharing this. Like when he was telling me this, I was driving and it was pretty creepy because of where I was driving. I had to get off of the Northway and then go down 9. And all along 9 in that area is all woods and old cemeteries and shit. So as they're looking, the light is just gone. There's no kind of like, no kind of bright kind of flash and then off. It was just a steady light and then gone. And they're looking, waiting for whatever is going to happen. And they distinctly remember seeing, he said, I remember seeing what looked like, he said it was weird because after that light stopped, he said it was almost like everything in nature started to work. He said the clouds kind of parted a little bit. There was a little bit of moon. He said it wasn't a full moon. He goes, and it wasn't, even a crescent moon. It was bright enough to where you could make out some things in the field area. And that you could see the wood line. So if that gives you any impression of how bright it is. It's not too bright, but bright enough to where you can see the wood line. And his buddy goes, is that a person? Is that a person? And they're looking, and he's like, I don't know. What are you seeing? What are you seeing? I don't see it. I don't see it. And he's like, there, right there. And once again, Rory's like, I don't see anything. What are you talking about? And his buddy's adamant about this figure in this field. And Rory's like, I don't see what you're saying. He goes, I don't see anything. He goes, are you sure? And it was either out of forgetfulness, and this is Rory's own words. This was his best friend who passed away, so I'm giving you his exact words. It was either like just forgetfulness or ignorance that he turned that flashlight on. And when he turned that light on, now mind you, it's not a very bright light, but it's bright enough to where, hey, if there's something there, now they can see it. Now, hey, there you are. He turns the light on, and they make out this figure that is in the middle of this field, and it stands up. And it's probably somewhere between, at first guess, 6-7 feet in height. And they're both like staring at this thing, and it's staring dead at them. They can't see any eye shine, they can't see any eye glow, nothing, but they know that whatever this thing is, it is staring directly at them. Rory hits the flashlight out of his friend's hand, just out of either anger or stupidity. He's like, I hit the flashlight out of my friend's hand, and he goes, we gotta go. And mind you, his buddy's flashlight's on the ground, on still, kind of just fucking illuminating the ground. And they can't see what this thing is. They can't figure out where it's at and where we're going to run to. So can we run to the trail system? We just can't. Should we run to where those weird lights were? Do we run to the woods behind us? Now, running to where the trail system would have been, they would have eventually came out to, where their car was parked. And there's a couple little houses, spots of little houses all through the woods in this a mile away. Behind them is nothing but woods, and then the Virginia state line. So you are literally like in the middle of this fucking Cumberland Gap, Appalachia area. There's a mountain to the west of them, and he's like, I grab the flashlight and I grab my friend's arm and I whip him in front of me, and I turn and I look. So he kind of like, we're gonna run away from our car. We're gonna run probably the dumbest way we can through the woods and head towards Virginia. Well, guess what? They get to Virginia and there's still more woods. There's no easy way of getting out from where they are, because mind you, they had to drive around. They had to go around into Kentucky to get to where they needed to be. So pretty much you're shit out of luck at that point. And he's like, turns and flashes the flashlight, and he sees it, and it's almost like this thing had not moved. And his eyes are starting to adjust to the moon and the flashlight and the darkness all kind of. And he's like, at this last point where I flashed the flashlight and I had pushed my friend ahead of me, he's like, I'm looking at it, and he goes, it looked like a shadow. He goes, it looked like this large animalistic shadow. He's like, that's what I got from it. He's like, the coloring and the way of its stature almost looked like it was not physical, but there was clearly something there, so it was physical, but it was just so strange. And he's like, we started to run into the woods, and he said, I realized probably like a minute after we were running that we were going to have to cut back and run through the wood line and then hit the trail system. But should we stay in the wood line, 150 feet in, or should we walk out? And then, so at least we know where this thing is. At least we have a fighting chance, possibly, if we've got or if we're going to be in the wood line, what if this thing is more equipped at going through the woods than us? As they're running and they had turned to go toward the trail, they get out of the wood line. That's just, they're following the wood line, they believe, but the wood line starts to cut in, So they're in, and they're looking back at the settlement, and they see the trail system right there. It's like, okay, here we are. Settlement's there. Where's the creature? Where is this thing? And his buddy has his flashlight. Rory's got his. They both got two beams going, and they're kind of spreading it out, looking. And Rory says something along the lines of, if we don't see it, we just go onto the trail and run like hell. He said, we can't let each other, one cannot be behind, and we have to pretty much run side by side, because if something happens and it grabs me, you better fight for me, because at least then I'll fight with you, and if something grabs you, I'm fighting for you. He's like, we've got to be one unit here to get out of here. And so they look, and then boom, they immediately see the shadow, but they were looking for bipedal. It's back down to quadruped, and it's pretty large. And it's closer to them now. And it still has that shadow-esque like appearance. Like seconds. Flashlights are on it. They finally get it. Seconds go by. And there's this just astounding bright light. And it's so bright that it's like blinding to them. Farther away, right where that creature was, it's this for like maybe 4, 5, 6 seconds. Not long at all, but almost like someone turned the day switch on and then turned it off real quick. So you know at that point your eyes are just like, oh man, this sucks. We can't see shit. And they're standing there looking into this field. And they realize that after their vision comes back, it's not there. And they look at each other and they're like, what was that? This is before YouTube. This is before people are talking about anything like portals. They start running. They hit the trail. And they just side by side, and they're running and they got their flashlights just on right in front of them. And they are a half a mile in. They've got that settlement way behind them. And they hear what can only be, he said, in those National Geographic shows, he said it sounded like we were in Africa or we were in some kind of rainforest. You hear those strange sounds that are not American woods or American forest sounds. Like some sort of weird, like just the jungle, essentially, like, and it's alive. He's like, that's all we heard. And we stopped because we were like trying to figure out what these noises are. And it was literally, like I said, he said it was just like we were in some sort of rainforest in some sort of, African or Central American or East Asian jungle. And all of these weird noises that we are not even accustomed to hearing are all kind of just screeching, and and he's looking around, they're both looking around like, what in the hell is going on? And as he turns his light, he said, I turned my light, and he said, my buddy turned his light too, because we were both scanning the tree line here. He said, but I turned and I looked, and he said, and looking right down at me, he said, in this huge freaking maple tree, he said, is this just monstrous looking creature. He said, I don't know if it was a Dogman, Jeff, but that's the closest thing I can tell you is this thing had these red eyes. He said, I've heard people talk about these hellfire eyes, and when I picture hellfire eyes, he goes, I picture like, a bright campfire, this orangish, yellow, red eyes. He said, these were red. These were like those red laser beams, except they weren't projecting out at us, but they were about the size of a $50. He said, I'm staring up at it. He said, I could feel my friend's arm brushing mine. He was, I could feel we were shoulder to shoulder. He said, I'm staring up at this thing. He said, and it lets out this, not a howl. It was almost like a howl growl mixed. He said, I've never heard any kind of canine make this noise. And it was just staring down directly at us. And I got my light on it. He was, I could see these just bright red eyes. He said, when it opened its mouth, I could see that it did have an animalistic kind of muzzle and I could see its teeth. They were not human-like teeth. They were predator teeth. They were sharp looking. They were not needle. And he's like, I've heard people describe Dogman teeth as like sharp, razor sharp. He goes, these looked almost like bear teeth or possibly some sort of carnivorous creature. He said, but I could see them. And they weren't glowing white. They weren't bright white, pearlescent white. He said they were a whitish yellow color of what I could see. He said, I turned to run. He said, and my friend was not there. He was gone. He said, so I'm looking for him. I could feel his shoulder. Seconds before. I turned back to look, and this thing's still dead staring at me. And it's now letting this low, consecutive growl. This deep, and I turn back around and I'm looking all through the woods. I'm looking, I'm kind of doing that whole, and I scream his name. And I hear thump. And I turn back around and there it is. It's 30 feet away. No further than 50, but maybe 30 feet away. And it's staring dead at me. He said, and I realized at that second, that was the creature that was in the field. He said, and I realized that how wrong I was when I thought it was 6 feet in height. He said, this thing was towering over me. He said, I'm not super tall. He's like, I'm 5'10". He said, this thing had 3 feet on me, at least. He said, I just started running. I'm running as fast as I can. I'm running for my dear life, Jeff. I'm screaming my friend's name. He goes, I got fucking tears in my eyes, dude. He said, I just keep running. My lungs are burning. He goes, I can hear this thing hammering through the woods behind me. And he said, here's the thing. My head's telling me that this thing can get me at any time it wants. Why isn't it? And then I'm running. My chest is on fire. I'm fucking crying. I'm still screaming my friend's name. I'm yelling at this thing. He said, I stop and I turn. And I turn my flashlight and I look for it. He said, and it was not there. He goes, but I could hear it in the woods. He goes, I realized that I'm not very far from my car. He said, I'm maybe 4 minutes. And I yell my friend's name once more. And nothing. And then the woods just fucking come alive again. That weird kind of jungle noises. And it was loud. He said, and I couldn't hear where that thing was anymore. And I started to run again. And I'm running. And I'm thinking to myself, the whole time I'm thinking to myself, my best friend's dead. And I'm leaving him behind. He's like, I got to figure out a way of getting back to him. And he's like, in my head, he's like, I'm wondering, he goes, I'm literally contemplating on driving my car through. He's like, I had this little kind of small rear wheel drive Nissan pickup truck. Not like the Tundra or whatever, the Titan, but the tiny little fucking Nissan. It's probably max 5 feet across. It's so tiny. Standard. He's like, box on the thing's 4 feet long. He's like, I'm imagining driving down this trail with it. He's like, and I'm thinking, I can do it. I just got to get to my truck and I can get my friend. He's like, I cannot believe I left him He goes, I cannot believe I left him. He said, I'm running. And he said, I felt this grab. He goes, I felt almost like a hand grabbed me. He said, my leg went right out from underneath me. And I hit the trail, and I kind of rolled, and I almost lost my flashlight, but I quick scanned above me, kind of like backing up. Like, he goes, you ever seen the movies where the killer's gonna get you and the people back up on their hands and they'll drag their ass? Like, he goes, that's kind of like what I was. He goes, but I'm not. My legs aren't beneath me. He goes, so I'm just kind of dragging myself. And he goes, my leg is on fire from whatever touched me. And he's like, I'm looking, and he's like, I thought it'd be right there. He goes, I thought, when I turned, this thing was going to be right there, and it was either going to be bipedal or quadruped, and it was going to just get me at that point. It was going to kill me and end my life right there. He goes, there's nothing there. He goes, I heard the growl, and the growl was further out into the woods now. He goes, and then I saw those lights. Those 4 or 5 lights in the distance. It was almost like they popped right on. And I look at him, and for some reason, something said, get up and run. The growl was further away, and the lights were back. Those little, whatever you want to call them, flashlights, torches, whatever. And he said, I jumped up. And in a second, I put weight on that foot where something had tripped me up or grabbed my leg. He said, right on my ankle, it felt like it was a really bad burn. Just this horrific pain. And I try to run, but my leg is really hurt bad. He's like, so I just pushed through it. And I can see my truck. He goes, I get to the parking area. He goes, and I turn back around and I'm looking and there's nothing. And he goes, I don't know when. He goes, but from some time before getting to that parking area where my truck was to from when whatever grabbed me and I fell, he's like, in that short amount of time, the woods were no longer a jungle, different continent sound. It sounded just like what our forests and what our woods, you hear crickets, you hear the cicada, you hear whatever. It was almost like it just changed. I'm standing there looking, and I run to my truck and I open the door and I start it up and put it in first gear, and I'm about ready to drive down that trail. He said, my lights are on, I'm looking at the trail, and I'm literally letting off the clutch, and all of a sudden I had my eyes were on that trail that whole time. I didn't turn my head. I didn't do anything. Literally, my friend was there in front of me, 15, 20 feet away. No light, no anything. Not there. He starts running toward my truck. I have tears in my eyes, but then I was like, is that my friend? And I lock the door. I don't know why. He goes, and he's like, let me in, and I'm like, where did you go? And he's like, what are you talking about? Where did I go? He's like, I have no idea. He goes, I was there with you when we saw that thing. And he goes, the next thing I know, I'm right here. He goes, let me in. He said, and I asked him a question that only he would know. And he answered it, and I unlocked that door, and he jumped in, and we drove the hell out of there. He goes, the whole time we drove home, he said that trip that should have taken 45 minutes, but took about an hour and a half, because we got turned around. He said, but we took the right way, the 45-minute trip. He said, and it took us a little longer than 35 minutes, a little less than 35 minutes. He said, so we shaved about 10 minutes off the time. He goes, I was hauling ass in that little truck. He goes, which was dangerous because it was rear-wheel drive and it only weighed about nothing, bench seat, freaking standard on the, right on the floor. And, he's like, we got to my house, and he's like, at the time, my room was in the basement, he said, and it was late. So I didn't want to wake up my parents by going through. He said, so we just opened the Bilco doors and went downstairs into my room from there. He said, we started talking, and I kept asking him, where did you go? And his only response was, I saw the creature with you. I heard the creature. We both turned around. He goes, I was there, and the next thing I know, I'm standing in front of the truck. He goes, I have no idea what happened. He's like, there's no any kind of, he's like, I was there. And he gets up to go get something. He said, I don't remember what I did or why I got up. He goes, but I kept asking him. He goes, when I got up and I put pressure or weight on my foot, he goes, I nearly fell over. And my friend's like, what's wrong with you? What happened? He goes, you twist your leg or something? And he's like, something grabbed me. He goes, I lift my pant leg, and there is what looked like a handprint. The only thing of it is there was the thumb. You could see the thumb. And then you saw 2 fingers. So like this kind of like 3-fingered. And my skin had like blisters. It was blistered. Like whatever grabbed me, burnt me. It only thing he said, it looked like talons, like a bird of prey. I could see clearly the thumb and just the 2. He said, this is what happened to me. And at that point, his friend looked at him and he said something along the lines of, when we're older, we're going to remember this. And we're going to talk about it forever. And they never went back. They remained best friends. So you hear those experiences where 2 friends or 3 friends or 4 friends have an experience together and they kind of just, I'm out of here, No, they stayed best friends. But they never talked about it again. And then the night that his friend had been in that car accident, strangely enough, he was what Rory thinks, because there was no other reason for him to be where he got in an accident. But he believes that whatever happened that night, something called him back because he was heading towards that area, and there was no reason why he should have been there, no reason why he should have been, he was about 15 minutes from going to this parking area off of the Shiloh Creek Trail. And there was no wet ground. There was no other automobiles. His car was careened over into an embankment and upside down and kind of like not in a tree, but it wedged in between two trees, and his friend had been decapitated. He, to this day, believes that whatever happened to them that night, wherever he went, there was some sort of connection, and it was calling him back. And that was the last, the night that he lost his best friend. He's talked about this experience with his wife, but no one else besides, his wife. He doesn't have, once he lost his best friend, he was kind of just wandering aimlessly through life. But sharing that experience, he said that it took about a month to a month and a half for the burn mark on his ankle to finally subside to where you couldn't tell that there was a thumb and two fingers. So what do you get? Like, you get kind of like a claw. And that's what we were talking about. I was like, dude, that sounds like some sort of claw. Like a reptilian claw or whatever. I'm like, I've always heard of Dogman. I've heard of strange three-toed footprints. But usually, the Dogman experience that people have talked about, they have 5 fingers. Maybe 6. Was it a demon? Did they go through some sort of portal? What were those lights? So he and I talked about that. He believes, after we shot the shit, talked a little bit about the whole, he believes that those lights that they saw in the very beginning and at the very end, when whatever that creature was, he believes fully 100% was a Dogman. He thinks those lights were probably orbs, and that the orbs guided him and his friend to where they needed to be in that settlement to find the Hensley settlement. And then as they're running away and running out of there, wow. Just a tragic case, man. So, his experience, I thought a lot about my own. And the experience that I had with my cousins with the Ouija board. And then my Dogman experience. And then my cousins and my friend, my 2 cousins dying. Was there a portal? That's the thing. Were those orbs, as they are walking out of there, were the orbs protecting them? Did the orbs guide them to that spot? And then as they were running out of there, did the orbs attract that Dogman? Where did the friend go? Did he walk into that portal where that creature came out of, that Dogman came out of? Because obviously, how he was describing it and how we were talking about it, he believed that whole woods, that first area was a portal. But then where did it go the second time? But why wasn't there a light? When he was staring at that creature, he's like, I know I would have saw a light if there was a light, you know, like he was right here. I could feel his shoulder. And then as I turned, there was nothing there. And then I said to him, what if he was there? I said, when did you not feel his shoulder? He said, when I turned, he said, I felt his shoulder. And then when I turned, he goes, it was almost like I brushed his shoulder. Like he was, you know, so he's staring at this creature. His buddy's right here with his shoulder kind of like ready to run. But when he turned, boom, he hit his shoulder. I said, what if he was there with you the whole time? I said, but just like in a rift or something. What if whatever that light was, that other light, there was a tear in the dimension? And what if he was walking with you and running with you that whole time? But he doesn't remember that trip either. His buddy didn't remember that trip. And then why was he going back? Was wherever he went that night, was that what was summoning me back? And what caused it? What made him get in that accident? And that right there, right there, anyone says there's no kind of power or no negative energy in the Appalachias, right there is proof. You have unexplainable events happening, and there's nothing to explain it. There's no logical explanation. Nothing. And there's strange experiences dating back to early settlers. Native Americans even have some weird ass shit happen out there back in the day. So, what is it about the Appalachia? Is that like it? My only thing, here's my idea. We know these demons, these reptilians, these creatures have been here for however long. What if there's some like, I don't know, negative energy from these creatures, these demonic entities. And I'm almost thinking that whatever fucked his leg up, that does not sound like a Dogman leg or a Dogman hand. Like I said, Dogman, we've heard of Dogman having 3-toed feet, but not 3, some sort of talon like. That almost sounds Surian to me. I don't know. It was. I mean, and then when he's telling me all of this, and he's thinking about his friend, you can hear the pain. You can hear, like, this is 27 years later, 26 when he lost his friend. But it's like his friend is just left, just passed. You can hear it. It's a fucking sad experience. So, Rory, thank you for sharing this with us. I know I thanked you yesterday, but I jotted everything down, all the events, and I'm going to go through Is this a missing 411 connection? Could this have been what happened to Dennis Martin? Boom, he's behind a bush. Oh, but then you got those people that are talking, oh, we shot this big creature. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but where the hell did he go? If you really think about the Appalachian area, it's just a powerful, powerful place. Beautiful. But I really think there is a dark, dark evil there. A dark evil. And there's no explanation of why it would be there either. Anyway, thank you for supporting the channel, guys. It is your support that helps the channel to continue to grow and go, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and our friends. These creatures are real. These events, they've happened. Share the information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.